Well, thank you very much.
And I don't think it's going to be changed.
Well, I'm pleased to hear it shaking things up because it just came from a question in a pub. I bumped into a well-known chef and restaurateur, Rick Stein, and I exchanged views on crustaceans. In fact, I observed their behaviour and he cooked them, and he simply said, do they feel pain? And that set off a line of research. So let's think of pain. Pain has two components. You think of two components. There's nociception. Nociception comprises neurons that can detect tissue damage, and they pass that information to the CNS. And in the CNS, at least in humans, it generates a noxious feeling or emotion that we call pain. But of course, nociception has another pathway and another function. It enables the animal to respond by reflex. It causes the animal to withdraw swiftly, either all or part of its body, and it avoids immediate further damage. And it's quite possible to have that nociceptive reflex without inferring any involvement of the CNS, and hence without inferring any pain in the animal. Nociceptive reflexes, that they do occur in humans, pain also occurs in humans, but nociceptive reflexes are extremely widespread in the animal kingdom and probably predates pain. With a reflex response, you get a swift action to stop tissue damage. There's a small number of synapses, no central processing, no awareness, and no long-lasting effects. So if nociception has that ability to stop the tissue damage, why have pain? Might life not be better without pain? Well, apparently not. Pain has evolved because it allows an awareness of the situation. Because the pain is unpleasant, it changes the motivation of the animal towards that situation and causes the animal to avoid that situation in the future. So pain enables a long-term change that reduces tissue damage over the long term. And by that means it enhances fitness. So how can we discriminate then between a simple reflex or pain? Well, we can try to separate the reflexes from pain by focusing on long-term changes in motivation that might enhance fitness. Or indeed, there might be situations with very short-term responses that cannot easily be explained as a reflex. And there are a number of criteria that I'm going to go through. I'll explain those as I come to them. Well, first, discrimination learning. We use shore crabs in this experiment. Shore crabs hide under rocks on the shore at low tide. If they come out in light conditions, they fall prey to avian predators. And the object of this experiment was to repeatedly place a crab in the centre of a brightly lit tank with two simulated rock shelters here, two dark shelters, one at each end. And we repeatedly placed the crab in the middle and observed which choice of shelter it made. We wired the crabs up so that we could deliver electric shocks to the hind legs. And each crab was randomly selected to receive a shock or not in the first shelter it chose. So if there was a preference for shelters for some reason, they either got a shock or not in that shelter. The crab was shocked every 5 seconds whilst it remained in the shelter, and the shelter, if it was chosen on a subsequent test, shock was received again in that shelter. No shocks were delivered if the crab went to the alternative shelter if the first one was shocked, and vice versa. So let's see what it did. Some crabs in trial 1, as I said, received shocks, some didn't. How did that affect the behaviour in trial 2? Did it stick with the same choice as the first it switched shelters in the second trial, where you can see there's no effect of being shot on the first trial in which they have some information. Rather, what we see is there's a strong tendency to stick with their first choice shelter. They go back to the one they used first. Let's look at trial 3 with respect to what happened in trial 2. Some were shot, some were not shot. Those that stick or switch, you can see those that weren't shot still persist with the shelter they picked in trial 2, but those that were shot now show a significant tendency to switch shelter. So after two trials, there's a change in behaviour and crabs are avoiding the shelter in which they were shot. The consequences of that is, you see on the upper line here, these are the number of crabs using the non-shot shelter, those using the shot shelter, and some crabs stopped playing the game and stayed compliant. Some crabs got out of the shelter if they received a shock, and only if they received a shock. No crab ever got out of a non-shock shelter. We can see that somewhat over 50% got out even in the first trial, but an increasing number emerged from the shelter during the trial in which they were receiving shock. And this seems to be another learning response. They are, if they've made a mistake, they are learning to correct it more quickly. So we can see that shock is aversive. Only those that receive shock get out, and they're paying a cost in getting out to go back into the light. So we see that these shore crabs are showing evidence of swift discrimination avoidance learning. That's not predicted by nociceptive reflex, and the data are consistent with the idea of pain. I'm not saying that proves pain, I'm simply saying it's consistent. But let's look at motivational trade-offs, which we've mentioned in a previous talk. By trade-off, I mean that reflexes don't require any central processing. It's not a decision-making process. But in a decision-making process, different motivations are traded off against each other. And I use this example here of zebras. Zebras feed on the plains in Africa, very hot, very dry. They become deprived of water and they have to walk many miles perhaps to get to a water hole where they will reliably drink. Well, usually reliably, because sometimes there's a good reason for not going to drink. So this shows that seeing water, drinking is not a reflex reaction to seeing water. It is, there is a decision-making process going on here, trading off different motivational requirements. So, we looked at this in hermit crabs. Hermit crabs, we used shells, which we bored 2 holes in the shell, not while the crab was in it, empty shells. We wired up the shells with electrodes so we could deliver a shock within the walls of the shell. And that's what the crab looks like in the wired up shell. And if we look at this crab in a glass shell, you can see those wires touch or very close to this naked abdomen, so it's easy to deliver a shock without going through the hard exoskeleton. What we did was to wire crabs up, we placed them in different environments, and we delivered shocks. Some of the containers had water in which a predator had been present, in this case, shore crab. Some had water in which a non-predator, the miteless, had been present, and others just had seawater without any added odour. And you can see that with seawater, 95% of them get out of the shell when they're shocked within the shell, and that looks like a reflex. With a non-predator odour present, 80% got out of the shell, and that's not different from seawater. But when there was odour of predator present in the seawater, only 41% got out of the shell. That demonstrates this is not a reflex. It's taking into account the possible predator presence. It's a decision, not a reflex. Another experiment which provided fortuitous results on trade-offs came using two species of shell. Around the shores of the UK, hermit crabs, small hermit crabs can be found in two main species, the littorina shell, and they really like these littorina shells. And a fewer crabs can be found in gibular shells, and they really don't like gibular shells. Give them a choice, they'll take the littorina, and this is a picture of the start of a fight, where this crab is going over and going to try and beat this crab up and take its shell, because it's a preferred species. So using this, we got crabs to occupy either a good shell, the littorina, or a poor quality shell, gibula, and all the shells were wired up in this experiment. Shocks were delivered to some crabs, just some of them. And we actually didn't want the crabs to get out of the shell. So these were low-level shocks that we hope would have some effect, we thought might have some effect, but not sufficient to get out of the shell. So other crabs weren't shocked. But some crabs, of course, did get out of the shell, but only if they were shocked. When we looked at the data, they were more likely to get out of the unpreferred species than the preferred species. That's not a fantastic p-value, but what the hell? It's less than 0.05. And that was not the aim of the experiment. The aim of the experiment was to have these crabs that didn't get out of the shell, we would then offer them a new shell to see if their motivation had changed towards the new shell. And those offered shells, if they received a shock, reacted differently to those that hadn't received a shock. They were more likely to approach the new shell and more likely to move into it. Further, their behaviour as they did these things was markedly different. This is the latency to approach the new shell, those in Obtusata or Gibula cibraria. These hadn't received a shock. They go and investigate shells, but they take their time about it, so rush on this. Those that received a shock had a much shorter latency to go over to the new shell. And when crabs find a new shell and contact it, they show this behaviour, they show a lot of investigation, but this is, they probe the aperture with their chili pads, their claws, and they ascertain its suitability, basically, we've shown from other experiments. If we look at the number of chili pad probes that these crabs use, those that hadn't been shot use a lot more, they're more relaxed about investigating the shell. Those that received a shot give a far more perfunctory examination of the shell before they move in. So it's clear that the small shock that some of these crabs receive dramatically changed the motivation of the crab towards a new shell. And sometimes, in one experimental group, we offered the new shell 24 hours after receiving the shock or not. And we essentially had the same sort of data that these crabs that received shocks were more motivated to get a new shell. Clearly, these data cannot demonstrate a reflex. This is a long-term memory of having received a shock in the shell, and it's changed their behaviour in the long term. We look at prolonged directed rubbing. Rubbing we see in vertebrates, very common. Direct attention towards a wound, or we see limping, we see guarding. A whole variety of activities are shown towards wounds in vertebrates, and including the fish work that we heard just before coffee. We used glass prawns in this experiment. We're going to use the antennae, they have long antennae, so easy to apply stimuli to those antennae. And in this experiment, we took the animal out of water, put it on damp tissue paper, selected an antenna at random, just one, and we pre-treated that antenna with water or with a local anaesthetic. We put it back for 5 minutes into the water, brought it out again, and then on the same antenna, we treated it some with water again, or with sodium hydroxide, or acetic acid, or pinched it with forceps. And then, when placed back in water, we observed the behaviour, and we could observe grooming where the antenna is repeatedly pulled through the tiny claws that these animals have, or rubbing against the side of the tank. Rather like in the trout experiment we heard about, we saw rubbing of the lip on the gravel. Here we see rubbing of the antenna against the side of the tank. These are just data for grooming, however, with a small claw. And you can see those pre-treated with water and then had water applied again don't groom their antenna. Those that receive the noxious chemicals show a lot of grooming, and those that receive the pinch show some grooming, but not a huge amount. Compare that in the same animals with the alternative antenna, the antenna that hadn't been groomed, hadn't been treated. And we see very low levels of grooming in those animals on their alternative antenna. That is, they seem to be aware of the site of application of those stimuli. And if we look at how pre-treating with a local anaesthetic affected their behaviour, you can see here where pre-treated with water, pre-treated with local anaesthetic, had a significant drop in grooming and in rubbing on the side of the tank. Turning to some work completed in the last few years in France, in Bordeaux, on anxiety. If you take a crayfish and put it in a cross or a plus maze, which has 2 dark arms and 2 light arms, then crayfish show a slight preference for the dark, but it is just a slight preference for the dark. They do wander around the light arms as well. However, if before that you put them in a container and expose them to electric shock, you stress them with shock, when you put them in a plus maze, they really cut down on their use of the light arms. They are becoming risk aversive. When these workers, Fossat and co-workers, examined the brains of animals that have been shocked or not shocked, he found in the brains, but not in the hemolymph, in the brains higher levels of serotonin, also called 5-HT. So serotonin is higher in those animals that were stressed with shock. If you take animals that are not shocked and just inject them with serotonin, they behave as if they've been shocked. They show aversion of the light. So you're going to replicate the shock with the serotonin. Serotonin goes up with shock. And what to me is a remarkable experiment and finding is that in humans who show high degrees of anxiety, you can treat that with a drug called Librium. You look at the data for unstressed animals. They show the use of both light and dark arms. Stressed animals, they stick to the dark arms. If you have stressed animals and you inject them with Librium, it works on crayfish as well as humans. They now behave as if they're not stressed. They have reduced their anxiety. Might this affect their long-term survival and fitness? This was investigated in some lovely work on squid, but here's an example on a crustacean, a Gammarus. And again, this is an experiment in Dijon. There's some colleagues of mine in Dijon. What they did here was they exposed some gammas to shock and found that shock increases shelter uses. That is, some minutes after having been shocked, these amphipods hide away in dark shelters. And that hiding away decreases predation by fish. But if you give these amphipods an anxiolytic drug, they don't hide away as much. Since the drug reduces the anxiety, and that is consistent with the idea that anxiety increases awareness of danger. And certainly that's the interpretation we draw from the lovely experiment on squid that I don't have time for today. So, to conclude, the data on crustaceans go beyond a nociceptive reflex. Undoubtedly, they show some nociceptive reflexes, but the data that I've concentrated are examples where these cannot be simple reflex responses. There's a long-term motivational change after exposure to noxious stimulus. Behavioural and physiological data are consistent with the idea of pain. And again, I say that's consistent with, it's not proof. It's not 100% proof. There's an awareness at the site of the injury. Hermit crabs that leave the shells and shore crabs that leave their shelters are giving up valuable resources to escape the shock or whatever stimulus. Other experiments that are not covered here demonstrate a range of physiological stress responses that can be shown to be due specifically to the noxious stimulus and not to any change in behaviour subsequent to that stimulus. There are indications of anxiety and increased attention to danger, and that increases fitness. So whilst these data are, again, consistent with the idea of pain, feeling, sentience, it's not the same as proving pain. And that is true for all animals. You cannot prove pain. In fact, it's difficult to prove pain in humans, but I'm accepting it. I know I feel pain, so I accept the possibility that some of you feel pain. However, we have an accumulation of evidence that is shifting my opinion anyway, when I was first asked the question I thought not very likely, it's now shifted to, yes, it is possible that something is going on beyond a reflex. It's possible that they are experiencing pain. It's possible that they are sentient. And the more and more data that accumulated, the more and more likely it is that this is true. It suggests then that there's been an early evolution of pain-like behaviour that predates the split between the mollusks, the arthropods, and the chordates. And sentience, it seems, promotes fitness by changing motivational state and thus reduces further tissue damage and promotes survival. So, thank you very much for your attention.